What is the greatest real-life plot twist in all of history? On the 28th of June, 1914, Gavrilo Princip's group the Black Hand ducked up the first time when it came time to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. His colleague was to throw a grenade under the carriage as the Archduke and his wife passed over. The grenade delayed and blew up as the next car came by. He panicked, swallowed a cyanide pill, and jumped in a nearby river. Except the cyanide pill just made him vomit, and the river was 6 inches deep, so he was caught pretty easily. Gavrilo Princip was pretty damn dejected and went to get some food at a local restaurant at this time. After the assassination attempt, Archduke Franz Ferdinand told his driver to head to the hospital where he and his wife could visit those injured from the failed plot on his life. Cars hadn't been around for too long, so when the driver got lost and tried to reverse the car, it stalled right in front of the restaurant where Princip was finishing lunch. He walked outside, saw the Archduke standing there, and fired into his neck. The most revolutionary event of the 20th century was a do-over. Greeks giving the city of Troy a pretty wooden horse that was secretly full of armored warriors. Someone invaded Russia and it actually worked. Good job, Mongols. At the start of the Cold War, Henry Murray developed a personality profiling test to crack Soviet spies with psychological warfare and select which US spies are ready to be sent out into the field. As part of Project MKUltra, he began experimenting on Harvard sophomores. He set one student as the control, after he proved to be a completely predictable conformist, and named him Lawful. Long story short, the latter half of the experiment involved having the student prepare an essay on his core beliefs as a person for a friendly debate. Instead, Murray had an aggressive interrogator come in and basically tear his beliefs to pieces, mocking everything he stood for, and systematically picking apart every line in the essay to see what it took to get him to react. But he didn't. It just broke him, made him into a mess of a person and left him having to pull his whole life back together again. He graduated, but then turned in his degree only a couple years later, and moved to the woods where he lived for decades. In all that time, he kept writing his essay, and slowly, he became so sure of his beliefs, so convinced that they were right, that he thought that if the nation didn't read it, we would be irreparably lost as a society. So, he set out to make sure that everyone heard what he had to say, and sure enough, Lawful's Industrial Society and Its Future has become one of the most well-known essays written in the last century. In fact, you've probably read some of it, although, you probably know it better as the Unabomber Manifesto. Edit. Thank you for the gold. During the 14th century, cats were killed en masse due to the belief that cats were in league with the devil and the cause of the Black Death. If the cats had remained alive to keep rodent populations down, the hosts of the fleas that were the actual cause, the plague would have had much less of an impact. Edit. For everyone saying cats would have fleas, yes, and they would carry transmitter disease as well, but due to predator to prey ratio, roughly 150 for cats, the density of the disease vector would be substantially reduced. Much like reducing the density of a forest can slow or stop the spread of fire, lowering the density of a disease vector can slow or stop the spread of said disease. It would have still existed but not in the same severity. It's definitely Darius the Great's ascension to the throne of Persia. Basically, he was caught literally red-handed standing over his dead predecessor with a knife. Oh it, thought Darius. Oh it, said the Magi. Call the guards. This guy just murdered the emperor. Whoa guys, listen, interrupted Darius. I know what this looks like, but it's not what it looks like. Not only did I not kill the emperor, but I can tell you who did kill him. It was this dead Methodica right here, who I realize looks quite a bit like the emperor, but what you need to understand here is that he was actually a shape-shifting wizard, right? So he killed the king and pod peopled his way to the throne, and all you guys are just lucky that you had someone like me here to avenge the rightful ruler, who I totally miss dearly. The Magi consulted, and with a chorus of why would someone lie about something like that, they unanimously decided to raise Darius the Wizard Slayer to the throne of Persia. The second tower getting hit on 9/11 changed everyone's perception of what was actually happening that day instantly. People dreamed that the internet would be a tool for worldwide knowledge, informed discussion, and communication. However, it actually developed into a sophisticated pornography delivery system. When Jimmy Kimmel revealed that he was behind the twerk fail video. When the Allied troops discovered the horror of concentration camps during World War II, I could not imagine preparing yourself for something like that. Attila the Hun turning back from his conquests after talking with Pope Leo I. Convicts getting sent to Australia, a much better country than where they came from. I'm going to simply take the answer you bare dead messenger gave 10 months ago to the same question. After World War I, France dictated the terms of armistice to the Germans. A mere 20 years later, after Germany had just got done with powering through the French in 6 weeks, Hitler set up a meeting in the same train car, in the exact same place as the armistice was signed after World War I, except this time, he was making the terms for the armistice to the French. Double quote. And, as you hell sheep added, and, even better, a few years later the Germans blew the train up while retreating so they wouldn't have to suffer the humiliation of signing another armistice in the exact same train car. There was that huge boat of Titanic proportions that was purportedly unsinkable. Too bad it wasn't iceberg proof. Romans kill Jesus to quell possible new religion, only to cause the creation of one of the world's largest religions. Edit. To all those pointing out why I'm incorrect. Forgive me, I'm Jewish. I never read the sequel. Joan of Arc helping the French defeat English, which led to then being driven out of France. 14-year-old girl coming out of nowhere, Orleans I think, to spank the English. Lady I didn't have sex with was pregnant. Plot twist. God did it and the baby was also the father. Hitler wanted to be a painter, ended up almost killing entire ethnicities of people. When King Louis V suggested the guillotine be triangular shaped, then the people used it to kill him. That a small time strip club owner can walk into the Dallas police station and shoot the man who shot the Potters 3 days earlier in front of the entire police force. Edit. Grammar. Et2. Brute. Edit. Thanks. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. The world pretty much spent the next 40 odd years down the rabbit hole. Yi Sun Sin. Pretty much all of this guy's life was an epic twist. He joined the Korean military back in the 1500s when they were being invaded by Japan. He became a top commander and helped save his nation from being conquered by the Japanese. Then his jealous rivals had him framed, tortured, and imprisoned. When he was released from prison he re-enlisted in the military at the lowest rank, then was promoted all the way back up to commander and once again saved his nation from defeat against impossible odds. Edit. Fixed for accuracy. That a bunch of college kids would beat the Soviet army in the Miracle on Ice. The way they made it through the prelims and into the medal round. No one thought they had a shot. Besides them, Americans were so enthusiastic and supportive of the US team but no one thought they could actually do it. In my opinion, it is and will forever be the greatest game ever played. The Cold War, the US hostages in Iran, the economy. There will never be a series of events that equates to those. It may not be the most significant event in history, but I do think it was the greatest twist. The end of World War II finding the death camps. Everybody was like, man, that Hitler guy is a massive douche. Stealing countries and imprisoning Jews and what have you. Wait, he killed them? How many? What the duck? Napoleon escaping Elba and sweeping back into brief power only to meet his Waterloo was a nice series of twists and turns. Absolutely no one saw the Big Bang coming. Backstory. There was a samurai in Japan, circa 1600, named Miyamoto Musashi, who was frequently late to his duels. He was very skilled and world renowned as one of the most talented samurai to have ever lived. One day, he decided to challenge the leader of the Yoshioka school, Seijiro, to a duel. Seijiro agreed, and as always, Musashi came late. He struck Seijiro with a single blow, crippling his arm and knocking him out. Seijiro decided to pass ownership of the school down to Denshichira, who immediately challenged Musashi back for revenge. Again, Musashi arrived late, disarmed and promptly defeated Denshichira. Here is where the plot twist comes into play. The head of the Yoshioka school is now the 12-year-old son of Danshichiro, Masashichiro. He, and his entire force of archers, musketeers, and swordsmen, challenge Musashi to a final duel. Musashi decides that this time he is to arrive early and hide nearby. Fantastic. So when Masashichiro and his army come marching by to the place where the duel is to occur, expecting a tardy Musashi as always, he springs from his hiding spot and runs to Masashichiro, completely demolishing this 12-year-old kid. He then escapes from the force by drawing his second sword. TL. Dr. Samurai defeats an entire lineage of a martial arts school by changing from his usual routine of showing up late. Edit. Circa 1600 and his name was Miyamoto Musashi. For those wondering. Edit 2. Words. Edit 3. More words. When everything was all this crazy giant lizard movie and then bam. Plot twist. Meteor. Monkeys take over and go to space. Japan attacking Pearl Harbor. That was a WTF just happened moment. Derrick Rose's return ending with a torn meniscus. World War I Germans have better tech, weaponry, more men, and are pretty much set up to win the war. Then England miraculously gets their spy department together. Q-boats stop U-boat combat. US joins the war, and tanks are invented, all in pretty short order. When D.B. Cooper jumped off the Boeing 727 into a wormhole in the airspace over Portland, or in Seattle, WA, and was transported back to ancient times, only to become Jesus. After the Treaty of Versailles was signed, Ferdinand Foch, a French general, exclaimed, "This is not a peace, it is an armistice for 20 years. Guess what happened 20 years and 2 months later? I got one. When WWE wrestler Chris Benoit and his family died, it was initially said they were murdered, and WWE had a memorial show on Raw for Chris Benoit, and about 18 hours later they found out Chris Benoit killed his family and hung himself, and decided to never acknowledge Chris Benoit ever again. When Fry became his own grandfather. It's not really a plot twist, but the Cold War was pretty anticlimactic. In 1941 the tomb of Timur Khan was exhumed by Soviet anthropologists. Upon opening the tomb, an inscription within it wrote, "Whoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." Nevertheless, 2 days later Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, which was the largest military invasion of all time, and caused more death and destruction than other nation that fought in the war would suffer. Everything is going great for the European nobles when suddenly, Black Plague. Canada tricking the us on 1812. This Maginot Line is impenetrable. There's no way the Germans would go through the Ardennes. Lee Harvey Oswald getting point blank murdered 2 days after he was arrested for shooting JFK, before he had made any official confession. Dun dun dun. Julia Child, sweet little old lady with a cooking show, was a spy for the British government. Edit. Seems I posted a headline and not a story. Term spy is debatable. It was for the US, not the British. And she was not very little. Sorry about that. I get annoyed when people post headlines they don't understand, and I'm doing the same thing. The Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expected that. Chinese intervention in Korea was a pretty one. MacArthur sure didn't expect to have to fight over 1 million Chinese soldiers. When that nutjob, who though the world was about 2/3 the size it actually is, didn't die on the ocean and somehow found a giant landmass that had stuff worth stealing on it. Battle of Stalingrad. Think we're out of people and ammo? Surprise. Itchy S. We have US surrounded with hidden tanks and artillery, and we gon' raise this place down. The excellent BBC documentary, 20th Century Battlefields, actually portrays this epic battle in a very informative way. Edit. Since everyone is saving this comment for the link, here's the whole episode uploaded on YouTube. Emo anything up to the Vietnam War was cool, and then the Falklands and Gulf War episodes were really meh. Saddam Hussein not having WMDs as to rank up their 4 great plot twists of the last 40 years. He used them in the Iran-Iraq War. used them against his own people, spent the 90s ducking with UN inspectors, and when given a chance to come clean, chooses bravado one last time. Edit. Plus we had the receipts from the French and German contractors who helped set him up. It was pretty thin evidence that we ultimately used to go into Iraq, but everyone was surprised that we found nothing. Bonus plot twist is Gaddafi coming clean and everyone not having a clue that Libya was in the game. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand that led to World War I and arguably World War II. 6 Bosnian Serbs planned an attack on his motorcade along a route from Ilidza Spa to Sarajevo. The first 2 along the route had bombs but failed to act. The third conspirator along the route, Ibrinovic, tossed a grenade at Franz's vehicle, which bounced off the back of the convertible cover and blew up in the street, wounding 20 people. Ibrinovic, having failed, swallowed a cyanide pill and jumped into a nearby river. Well, the cyanide pill failed and the river was only 13 centimeters deep due to a hot weather. A crowd beat him and took him into custody. The motorcade raced away and the remaining 3 assassins failed to act, surviving the attack. Ferdinand, being a badass, decided to go to the hospital to visit the 20 wounded, instead of going into hiding. While Franz was traveling to the hospital, Gavrilo Princip, one of the 6 conspirators, was pissed off BC of the botched assassination and went to go get some food at Schiller's Delicatessen. On the way to the hospital, Franz's driver took a wrong turn and had to reverse the car. The car stalled as many old models did when going in reverse. Where did it stall, you ask? Right in front of Schiller's Delicatessen for awaiting Gavrilo Princip. Princip saw the car, walked outside and shot Ferdinand and his wife dead. Long story short, Franz Ferdinand's car stalled right in front of the restaurant where the assassin just so happened to be. This is one of the greatest and deadliest coincidences in human history, leading to World War I, World War II and life as we know it today. Seemed that Hitler was going to be Babaface with a crappy painter gimmick, but nope. He turns heel and uses his great mix skills to form one of the most powerful stables the world has seen. When Truman overcame the odds and defeated Thomas Dewey, it looked like the USA would have a long, bloody land war against Japan, but they used a Deus Ex Machina to end the World War II Pacific Theater story arc early. The Treaty of Versailles ends the worst war known to man at the time, but sparks a second world war, set up the modern day boundaries of the Middle East with no cultural considerations, and Woodrow Wilson denied Vietnam self-determination from France in order to get the treaty passed, eventually sparking the Vietnam War. The treaty that was exposed to end all wars, sparked many of the current problems today. A positive twist, a black man sits in the US Oval Office. Epicurus was pretty much right. The universe is made of tiny bits of mindless matter which combine to make higher level structures, and nothing else. Plato and Aristotle were more than 2000 years of going down the wrong path. It turned out, after millennia, that guy had built a pretty good approximation of the world that no one would be able to prove for a very, very long time. Light is a wave and a particle. Born in 1880, Helen Keller was the daughter of a former Confederate officer turned newspaper editor. Though she was born quite healthy, a bout of scarlet fever at 19 months of age nearly killed her. She survived, but the fever left baby Helen deaf, dumb and blind. Her father wrote to ask Alexander Graham Bell for help. Bell, in turn, contacted friends at Boston's Perkins Institute for the Blind. They sent their best pupil, Annie Sullivan, to Helen. And you know the story from there. With maybe one exception, it wasn't the movie makers who gave Annie Sullivan the title of the miracle worker. It was Mark Twain. That's the story you know. The one made into countless movies. Girl loses 3 senses. Girl helps girl. Girl overcomes handicaps and learns to speak, read and write. By the way, Helen Keller even graduated from Radcliffe College in 1904. Now here's my question for you. What did Helen Keller do between her graduation from Radcliffe in 1904 and her death in 1968? After all, this incredible woman overcame every obstacle life had thrown in her path. So, what's the lesson in this story? If she didn't go on to accomplish something really important, if she was strong enough to survive her ordeals, but then did nothing else in her life with that force of mind, doesn't that make her struggle insignificant? Okay, Maybe you know that Helen Keller gave lectures. She did. Maybe you know that she wrote books. Did that. 2. Now, what did she speak and write about? Well, here's how a typical bio of Helen Keller reads. More than she championed women's rights, fought for the cause of workers and equality for minorities. This from another bio. More than she spoke out against things such as child labor and capital punishment. Good God, it only gets better. Kids, a woman overcomes tremendous obstacles, then uses her new talents to champion the causes of underdogs. Makes you wonder why she had that FBI file, doesn't it? That's the problem with the way we tell our American history. It's so darn innocuous and sanitized. Let me give you a little list of Helen Keller's writings and speeches. 1912. How I Became a Socialist. 1914. Brutal Treatment of the Unemployed. 1915. The Menace of Our Military. 1916. Strike Against the Great War, and the same year, Why I Became a Member of the International Workers of the World. 1919. End the Blockade of Soviet Russia. 1921. Help Soviet Russia. 1929. The Spirit of Lenin. That's right. Helen Keller as an adult was a revolutionary socialist and, according to J. Edgar Hoover, a communist. To boot. Let me quote to you from an article Keller wrote in 1912, titled How I Became a Socialist. More than the first book I read was Wells' New World for Old. By the way, Annie Sullivan gave her that book. Again from that article. More than I am no worshipper of cloth of any color, but I love the red flag and what it symbolizes to me and other socialists. I have a red flag hanging in my study. She also uses the term comrades in that writing to describe her close friends. In 1916 she gave a speech at Carnegie Hall, called Strike Against the War. Some excerpts. More than we are facing a grave crisis in our national life. The few who profit from the labor of the masses want to organize those workers into an army which will protect only the interests of the capitalists. I wonder why they left that out of the movie. She went on to say, more than Congress is not preparing to defend the people of the United States. It is only planning to protect the capital of American speculators and investors. Every modern war has had its root in exploitation, and your vote will not make a free man out of a wage slave. Of course. Helen Keller said and did all that when she was just a mere socialist. In 1916 she joined the International Workers of the World, a group which made socialism look nearly right-wing Republican. In an interview with Barbara Bindley, published in the New York Tribune on the 16th of January, 1916, Helen talked about her political shift to the extreme far left, admitting that she was a disciple of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. Quoting her from that interview, more than I became an IWW because I found out that the Socialist Party was too slow. Bindley asks, what are you committed to, education or revolution? Keller replies, revolution. We have tried peace education for 1900 years, and it has failed. Let us try revolution and see what it will do now. In 1921 she wrote, more than I love Russia and all who stand loyally by her in her mighty wrestlings with the giant powers of ignorance and imperialist greed. Oh, why cannot the workers see that the cause of Russia is their cause? In her book, Midstream, My Later Life, published in 1929, Keller writes, more than I see the furrow Lenin left sown with the unshatterable seed of a new life for mankind. A new star has risen in the east. It is Russia and it will warm the world. Now let's be fair. During Helen Keller's early life, working in America didn't give the average person the life as we know it today. A job meant a 60-hour week, and most paid wages too low to support a family. The workplace was dangerous, but if you were hurt, no disability pay kicked in. Retirement plans, even social security hadn't been thought of. Many struggling people, therefore, found it easy to believe in the concept of a workers' paradise in Russia. Ronald Reagan was even taken in, but the Communist Party turned down his application for membership. They considered him a flake. Helen Keller didn't quit talking or writing about socialist and communist issues. Finally, in 1943, the FBI opened a file on her. They couldn't tell whether she was a communist, a Nazi, or a fascist, but by FBI standards they knew she was something really rotten. Helen Keller passed away in 1968. Today she's idolized by millions, and her courage in overcoming her handicaps is an inspiration to us all. But by not teaching them anything about Helen Keller's life after she overcame those tremendous hurdles, we're telling our children that her later life was without meaning, and that's not true. You see, those ideals she talked about in her radical days are reality today: better wages, better working conditions, the end of child labor, women's suffrage, help for the handicapped, and retirement benefits. They seemed radical at the time, but now they're planks in any good candidate's campaign platform. Yet, in her time, she was considered a dangerous radical, and we can't teach kids in our schools to admire that. Now can we? You never knew she was a radical. You didn't know her political beliefs. You didn't know she helped found the American Civil Liberties Union, or that she gave money to help the NAACP in the 20s. You're just like me, still mentally picturing Patty Duke with her hand in the stream of pump water, having the word spelled out in her hand by Anne Bancroft's fingers. Past that, history has cleaned the slate of what she did, but we don't have to remain ignorant. Helen Keller called the nation to a workers' revolution. She pitched a battle, in print, in speech, and in the streets, against the evils of capitalism. I'll leave today's story with two of Helen Keller's sayings, one humorous and one brilliant. More than I think God made woman foolish so that she might be a suitable companion for a man. And my personal favorite, more than people do not like to think. For if one thinks, one must reach conclusions, and conclusions are not always pleasant. America's most cherished radical and communist, Helen Keller. Blockbuster opened their first store in 1985. A news article in a well-read financial magazine questioned Blockbuster's business concept and saying there was no future in that business. By 1993, Blockbuster became a multi-billion-dollar industry. At its peak, Blockbuster had up to 60,000 employees and more than 9,000 stores. In 2000, a man frustrated with having to pay Blockbuster's expensive late fees thought of an alternative to the video rental system and created Netflix. He approached Blockbuster to sell his company to them for $50 million. However, Blockbuster denied the offer, saying that there was no future in that business. As of 2012, Netflix's revenue is $3.61 billion with an operating income of $50 million. Earlier this month, Netflix expressed plans to premiere movies on the same day at opening in theaters. Meanwhile, Blockbuster is out of business. The last movie rented from Blockbuster was, appropriately enough, This Is the End. There has been no confirmation of whether the rental has been returned or if late fees will apply. A whole lot of Western history so I doubt anybody will care about this, but when Gajah Mada, Prime Minister of the Majapahit, today, Indonesia, rose from humble beginnings to unite over 17,000. Think about that number for a second. Distinct and different islands only to eventually, and very, very strangely and suddenly, violently betray his own kind. He was quickly exiled and died in obscurity, a symbol of heroism and pride and a symbol of the recklessness of mankind at the same time. I wish more people knew about Southeast Asian history. They would make for some absolutely amazing cinema. Southeast Asia has stories, but not the Hollywood budget, so I'm hoping one day America will pounce on these kinds of ideas for movies. Bonus fact, he was very athletic, yet fat, kind of like an NFL lineman.